Let's bring in Douglas Murray, best-selling author of The Strange Death of Europe, The Madness of Crowds, and his latest work, The War on the West. Douglas, we'll get to the ICC shortly, but first today we learned through our new court filing that was unsealed today, the Department of Justice authorised the use of deadly force when FBI agents executed a raid at President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence in August 2022. This seems all a bit heavy-handed, Douglas, when looking for classified documents.
Yes. I mean, when this first happened, I said to you, I mean, the best interpretation was that some librarians in the National Archives got cross, but who knew that librarians could send in the gunmen? I wonder if the same consideration of lethal force was ever considered when documents needed to be retrieved from President Biden's Chevrolet and his garage and various other places. It just seems extraordinary to me, as I think it will to most viewers. After all, what would the FBI have been expecting? Were they expecting a sort of standoff? Were they expecting to shoot security officers and others who, of course, would surround President Trump at all times anyway, in and out of office? It seems extraordinary to me, and could have been, if it had been followed through on, one of those absolute kerosene on the fire events that everybody in American politics is rightfully fearful of.
Well, yeah, these threats to democracy we keep hearing about. Now, let's go to the ICC. And you warned us about the International Criminal Court and its Chief Prosecutor, Karim Khan, some time ago. And you were right on the money. Khan has now defended his recommendation of arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli Defence Minister. Khan says he took this action because Israeli courts did not appear to be investigating alleged abuse in Gaza.
It's an extraordinary thing. And by the way, anyone interested in dystopias should look at the announcement that this so-called prosecutor Khan made with these two equally nondescript people standing behind him. It looked like a bad 1970s B-movie, BBC made-for-television cop film. People have to remember that the ICC, the International Criminal Court, is simply not what it claims to be. It does not have jurisdiction, and in my view, it should not have jurisdiction. In my view, it should not have jurisdiction over British troops or British politicians, nor should it, in my view, and this is a case for the Australian public, of course, have jurisdiction over Australian soldiers or over Australian politicians. But of course, Israel isn't a signatory to the court, quite rightly, in my view, as this has demonstrated, and nor is America, because America knew from the beginning of this extra-national entity, this supranational entity, that if you allow these nondescript, highly motivated ideologues like so-called prosecutor Khan, they will do all of their hobby horses. I'm fascinated that Khan has immediately decided to go for the Jews. Of course he has. He singled out the one Jewish state in the world and is trying to prosecute its democratically elected leader. This is the first time the International Criminal Court has come for a democratically elected leader. Has Mr. Khan bothered to go for, I don't know, Bashar al-Assad or the supreme leader in Iran who hangs women who've been raped for the crime of being raped? Has he gone for any of them? No, of course not. He's not interested in pursuing all of these Muslim leaders in the Middle East who carry out atrocities day in, day out. No, he's gone for the democratically elected leader of the one Jewish state. He's an ideologue. The court has no jurisdiction over this, and it is simply a smear. And Khan is playing right into the hands of Hamas. Whether he means to do so or not, I suppose it's only for him to say.
Well, we have a list of the experts who back the ICC warrants against Israel. The panel includes international law and human rights expert Danny Friedman, British House of Lords member Helena Kennedy, And British Lebanese barrister and human rights lawyer Amal Clooney, who posted a statement on the website of the Clooney Foundation for Justice. She wrote, "We unanimously conclude that there are reasonable grounds to believe that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli Defence Minister Yoav Gallant have committed war crimes and crimes against humanity, including starvation as a method of warfare, murder, persecution and extermination. I served on this panel because I believe in the rule of law and the need to protect civilian lives." Douglas, what's your response to that?
These are all more preposterous political ideologues pretending to be cool, level-minded lawyers. Helena Kennedy is a far left-wing career political operative in the UK. She spent her whole life campaigning for loony left causes and giving them some legal patina. Amal Clooney, another highly motivated political operator. In her case, doubtless she will use this to raise more funds for the Clooney Foundation and to burnish her own credentials in some other way. But if you just consider what they've done there, first of all, these preposterous so-called judges and lawyers have done no on-the-ground research, nothing original. They haven't been into Gaza. They haven't been in any of the areas of the fighting. So when they say we find that Benjamin Netanyahu could have overseen murder in a war zone, they don't even know that it has happened. I mean, I suspect there is some killing in a war zone. It strikes me as being kind of de rigueur, and that's why Hamas shouldn't have started a war. But the other thing these people have done is, as I said earlier, Khan decided to go for the one Jewish state in the world. But he waited and did it at the same time as going for, or claiming that he's going to go for, Sinwar, the Hamas leader who planned and organized the 7th of October massacres. So what he's doing is this neat political, I would say even Islamist ideological thing, which is if you can't get through in the way you want, you pretend there is moral parity between Hamas and the IDF, between Sinwar, who planned the 7th of October atrocities, and Benjamin Netanyahu, whose task it is, the unenviable task of getting the hostages home and punishing the leadership of Hamas. They have just drawn an equivalence between those two things. I think it's, as I say, highly motivated, highly political at best. The whole thing stinks of an agenda. And I would just say that everybody who's just stumbled upon the International Criminal Court should remember, again, it isn't what it says it is. It has no jurisdiction in these matters, and nor should it. If it is agreed that these highly motivated individuals can come for Benjamin Netanyahu and the Minister of Defense Gallant, they will be coming for an Australian Prime Minister next, or a British Home Secretary, or an American Secretary of State, and they have no more right there.
You're 100% right there. And the decision to announce this action against the Hamas leadership and the Israeli Prime Minister and Defence Minister on the same day, it is such a clear political move to put them on the same page, as if there is some equivalence there. It's just transparent.
Yeah.
It is, and it's going to work
legally.
Absolutely. Well, this decision by the ICC has been condemned by Israel's strongest allies. We've had the United States come out strongly, the United Kingdom, but sadly, our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has been shamefully weak on this issue, and his Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, I'd argue, has been even worse. Let's hear from the Prime Minister first.
Well, I don't comment on court processes in Australia, let alone court processes globally, of which Australia is not a party.
Apparently he can't make any comment on court cases overseas. Just a few minutes later, he made comment on the Julian Assange case, which is happening overseas. So he couldn't even stay consistent there. But his Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, used her department to issue a statement expressing support for the ICC. The statement said Australia respects the ICC and the important role it has in upholding international law. The decision on whether to issue arrest warrants is a matter for the court. Douglas, Australia's response seems not just weak but unprincipled compared to what we've seen from the UK and the US.
Well, first of all, don't be so sure that the US and UK are so principled on this. I think there's a political game going on here, and the Biden administration would be perfectly happy to give over Netanyahu in order to get a preferred candidate. So there's a lot of different types of politics going on. And in the UK, the Labour Party, who are likely to be the overwhelming party of government in Britain later this year, their idiot representative actually welcomed the ruling. So that would be British policy too. As for Albanese and Wong, I mean, they can console themselves, and certainly Wong can console herself, that she is on exactly the same side as Hamas leader Khalid Mashal. Let me just read you quickly what Khalid Mashal said earlier this week in a speech. He said that it's extremely important to annihilate the Zionists for the good of humanity, and that being far away from a zone of jihad does not mean that you are absolved from carrying out jihad. He says that the Al-Aqsa flood, which is what he and his friends in Hamas call the 7th of October massacre, he said the Al-Aqsa flood must be followed by, and has been followed by, quote, the great student flood. All of those students on Western campuses, they're doing what the head of Hamas is wanting them to do. He said we need a media flood. Well, Khalid Mashal's got the media flood all the way from the New York Times to Al Jazeera. He says then we need a legal flood, such as the incidents and the attempts to use The Hague. He's also said, of course, that we need jihad and resistance and a jihad flood. So Wong can console herself, like all of those wrong-headed students on various campuses who've made common cause with Hamas. They're on exactly the same page, lockstep with one of the people who planned the 7th of October massacre. I hope they're proud of themselves. History will be horrible to them.
Well, on those wrong-headed students, we've seen them across university campuses in the US, UK, right here in Australia. They'd be feeling even more emboldened by this decision by the ICC. And I wonder if it'll be enough to see them remove their masks, Douglas. You wrote about this trend of anti-Israeli protesters wearing masks outdoors, and you've called on these cowards to show their faces.
Yes, it was fascinating to me, Rita. When I was in Australia recently, I noticed that all the anti-Israel protesters all seemed to be, whilst they were doing their thing of celebrating Hamas, they seemed also to be incredibly scared of COVID. Rita, very 2020. Here in New York, up at Columbia, all these students who are shouting things like "Go back to Poland" to the Jewish students at Columbia. They're also terrified of respiratory viruses. Very interesting. Same thing in the UK, where the brave students at Cambridge University shout their filth and also shout it through masks. Now, I suggest this is all bunk. They're not actually afraid of COVID whilst they're doing their bit for Hamas. They know that what they're doing might be shameful. They know it might get them into trouble. They know that when you stand among a group of people all wearing their Yasser Arafat kaffirs and feeling so proud of dressing up in Hamas terrorist chic, they sort of sense maybe at some point in the future, this will go wrong and I might have to account for my presence here and my actions. So what do? I go all 2020 and I put a mask on. And the authorities, in my view, and everyone else should say, in America in particular, the last group of racists who were allowed to parade through America with their faces covered were the Ku Klux Klan. Now, people used to say then, if you're so proud of your racist ideology, why don't you show your face? And it's the same thing with these students and others. I'd like them to show their faces. I show my face when I speak. You show your face, Rita. We're not afraid of being held to account for our opinions. We put them out there like anyone else who's sensible, and we expect to be held to account for them. These people do not. They are acting simultaneously as radicals and cowards. It's not surprising those two things often go together, but I'd say to them, to use a phrase that might trigger them, man up, guys. Show your face. Let the world see the bigotry face to face.
Well, I saw some of them when they were arrested. I think it was UCLA, it was some university campus where the police made a point after they put them in handcuffs to remove their masks. And they did not seem to enjoy that at all. Now, to the UK quickly, where the Times is reporting that police are being told to make fewer arrests because of the lack of space in prisons. Yes, chief constables are being advised to consider pausing non-priority arrests and also suspend operations that may trigger large number of arrests until there is enough capacity in the prison system. What could go wrong with that, Douglas?
I have to say, the UK police advice is late. The UK police don't bother arresting anyone anyway. I mean, unless obviously, for instance, you've tweeted something out about a trans child perhaps not being operated on and molested by pervy surgeons. But, you know, if you have your house robbed, and I mentioned this to you before, Rita, half the police forces in England and Wales haven't made one arrest in recent years for burglary, not one.
True.
So actually, this advice, and it's always the most ridiculous advice, that, you know, we're running out of prison places, so let's just arrest fewer criminals, as opposed to we will build as many prison places as there are criminals who need to go into them. No, they're worried about the number of people in prisons, and they don't need to worry. The way that the police in Britain are going, the prisons may be filled with tweet crime people, but there won't be any burglars. And of course, as we know from Sadiq Khan's London, there aren't any stabbers or murderers. So actually, I'm amazed there's any shortage of prison spaces. I'd have thought that if you did have the bad luck to be locked up in Chokey in the UK these days, you'd be able to effectively hot desk it among the cells. You'd probably have your choice of cell because most of them are empty because the police can't arrest anyone for any actual crime. Haven't bothered in years.
Now, before you go, I want to get your opinion on this new therapy craze that seems to be very popular with some women who are going to the woods and just scream and bash the ground with sticks. It's called rage therapy. These rage ritual therapies can be a costly affair. If you want the full package, it can cost upwards of $4,000. Money well spent, Douglas?
I mean, it struck me that a few of them just ought to take it out by going to the gym. It'll be cheaper and necessary. Not to want to body shame anyone, but there's something just it's a sort of civilizational breakdown thing. This, you know, we have somebody there saying they feel sad and another one feels afraid. I hate to break it to them, but if any of them are watching, human life is sad. It is also joyful. You are sometimes going to be afraid in your life, and sometimes you won't be. You might even be brave. Human life, one of the great things about it is it's filled with lots of emotions, but in general, it's a good idea to keep them in check and keep yourself sane. And one of the ways in which you can tell that you're not being sane is when you're standing in the middle of a wood being rinsed for $4,000 by some charlatan, smashing the ground and screaming. That's a sign that you've not got it together, and an overpriced stick beating on the ground session ain't going to help you. I would argue all sorts of other things could, but these are just people whose lives are not together. I wish them luck, but this isn't going to put it together. They are going to have to do a lot more work than this, Rita.
Yes, but at least they're outdoors in the woods getting some fresh air. Let's look at the positive side. Douglas Murray, thank you so much.
At least they're not online, Rita. At least they're not online screaming like that, as many people are. At least they're doing it in the woods, offline.
Precisely. Thank you, Douglas Murray.
Thank you.